A glitzy, glamorous 1980s fairy tale first on 4, the tale of two brothers, Saatchi and Saatchi.
This is the story of two brothers who were masters in the skills of illusion. One became the world's largest collector of modern art, and the other a conservative peer.
They wanted power, wealth and fame.
They were great manipulators, and it worked for them, but it hurt an awful lot of people.
The Saatchi brothers from the very beginning had a very clear aim, which I suppose in 2 words was global domination.
It's a story of ambition, intrigue and catastrophe in the world's most famous advertising company, Saatchi and Saatchi, and how £1 billion was wiped off the value of investors' funds.
Knowing what has transpired, I would have never touched this company with a 300-foot pole.
How could there have been such a screw-up that involved so many people and so much money?
December 1986, Saatchi and Saatchi's Christmas party. A party still spoken of with awe, even by advertising executives used to the excesses of the 1980s.
It was an amazing sight. You had a whole fairground that was created. They had Ferris wheels and merry-go-rounds and bumper cars, which was fine. And everyone got drunk, and by about 12 o'clock the St. John's ambulance are ferrying backwards people and backwards and forwards after being flung off rides and goodness knows what else. And all kinds of excess. Lots of stories of drunken debauchery, because they used to invite various personalities, TV personalities, and halfway through the evening a former colleague of mine said, "Oh, have you heard about so-and-so outside? She's giving blowjobs to people." So it's all right. But we didn't find that particularly unusual. It was just like, oh right, it's another Saatchi party.
Saatchi and Saatchi had reason to celebrate. That year, it had become the largest advertising agency in the world. For 16 years, the agency had been on a roller coaster, as a £1,000 private company had been turned into a £1 billion worldwide business. Heady times. Their origins were very different. (1968), a year of rebellion. While many awaited the downfall of capitalism, 26-year-old Charles Saatchi planned his new business career. Already an acclaimed copywriter, Charles Saatchi opened a small consultancy to provide creative ideas for advertising agencies. With witty but striking adverts like The Famous Pregnant Man, he quickly gained international recognition. And like others of his generation, Charles was ready to challenge the old order. Looking for a style to revolutionize British advertising, he alighted on an irreverent, eye-catching American campaign.
We admired the creativity, the wit of that advertising, the intelligence of it, yet the accessibility of it. And it was that which drove us. It was that creativity which really thrilled us.
Tar, like this, sticks inside your lung.
Charles Saatchi experimented by mixing dramatic visuals with a tough, simple message to try and change behavior. The impact of adverts like these changed his life.
Now every cigarette pack will show its tar yield group, so that you know how much dangerous tar it contains.
It dawned on us that really the only way forward was for us to become an agency, and Charlie again got there before everybody else.
Many people in this country behave like a peculiar Arctic rodent called the lemming.
The first television advert for the new agency combined another simple message with troubling, controversial images.
Thousands of British men and women deliberately shorten their lives. They inhale cigarette smoke, which they know causes illness because doctors have warned them so often.
Now you know what you're asking for when you ask for a packet of cigarettes.
To sell the message and his agency, Charles agreed to his only television interview.
I think our job is purely one of telling every smoker in the country exactly what he's letting himself in for. And I think that's really what's been unfair about the government's approach, because they have sat on a fund of knowledge for a great number of years now, and I think it's up to them to let smokers know what they're doing to themselves.
But after the crew left, Charles, then an occasional smoker, gasped, "Shit, someone give me a fag." From the start of the new venture, he was joined by one of his younger brothers, Maurice.
And I said, "Charlie, you know, when he's 24 or something, I mean, he's kind of like just out of school, and, you know, we've got no credibility." And Charlie looked at me and he said, "Yeah, John, you're right, but I can trust him, and that's worth everything."
What united both brothers was a steely determination to succeed. The sons of well-off Iraqi Jews who were forced by anti-Semitism to rebuild their lives in post-war Britain, they saw themselves as outsiders against an unwelcoming establishment. Soon after starting up, Charles boasted that their agency would become the largest in Britain, saying with passion, "They won't laugh at us two little Jewish boys anymore."
Charles was street smart and Maurice had a first-class honours degree at the LSE. So together, they presented a very attractive image, but what they needed was somebody to provide the substance, and this is where Tim Bell came in.
Tim Bell was really the man who ran the agency. He had long, shaggy hair, he had a Ferrari, he's very good looking, beautiful girlfriends. Your kind of perfect stereotype advertising man. And he had the charm, and he had the kind of ability to go with it. So he was the perfect boss.
We were challenging the established order. We were coming along and saying, here we are at 24, 26, 28, which is how the three of us when I was the old man. And we were saying, there is another way of doing things.
While Britain had changed during the swinging 60s, advertising agencies seemed frozen in the 50s.
Before I knew what was happening, we were on our way to the wilds of Baker Street to call on Foot, Cone and Belding, who handle Regent's advertising for them. They tell me there's a lot of talent in advertising agencies. I hardly had time to look at the receptionist once, never mind twice.
What we did was outrage and displace the old wood-panelled gin and tonic ad men that had characterised the business from 1950 right through to 1970.
It's gift time at Hot Point. And see what you get with the Hot Point.
To displace the gin and tonic establishment, young hotshot agencies had to produce better ads.
Makings all wrapped up too. Buy your Hot Point kettle.
That wasn't too much of a challenge.
While it's still gift time at Hot Point.
My dear, I use Heinz beans for all sorts of dishes.
A million housewives every day pick up a tin of beans and say, beans, Heinz.
Even in the late 60s, most ads still painted a cosy, safe view of Britain, the family, and products they were selling.
I like my beans just hot on toast. What a good idea.
Come on, Jimmy. One more for the king.
No.
Saatchi's, a small agency relying heavily on charities for clients, could take risks and present a very different image of the family.
Oh, Jim, you must. I cooked it specially.
Don't listen to him. Give him some more gatto with the cream.
One way to a man's heart attack is through his stomach.
You don't look at all well, Jim. Are you sure they're giving you enough to eat?
Eat a little less and look after yourself.
Hello, it's Amy from Campaign here.
The brothers set out to make Saatchi and Saatchi a brand name. They built close relationships with journalists and the advertising industry's own glossy and gossipy weekly trade paper, Campaign.
It's certainly true that the Saatchi brothers spotted Campaign as a vehicle through which to promote their agency, and they did that very successfully.
The Saatchis tried to woo editors and reporters by wining and dining them and by sending gifts like champagne, salmon and flowers. Campaign was soon jokingly referred to as Saatchi's in-house magazine.
And he invented a man called Jack Robinson.
Rings a bell. Who was he?
And he would ring up Campaign and say,
"Hello, this is Jack Robinson. I've just heard that the Schweppes account has moved.
Oh, as anonymous sources?
Yes.
No, that's crap.
Campaign.
So because we could plant the most wonderful stories. It was a sort of saying in the business. We'd say, here's one that Jack Robinson can tell the world about.
The Saatchis soon learned they could manipulate editorial in a national newspaper.
Charles Saatchi announced that he was putting transfer fees on the creative team, and this made the front page. That if you wanted to buy John Hegarty, you would have to pay the equivalent of Alan Shearer in those terms.
He then punted this story to the Sunday Times Business News, and they picked up the story, sitting on a bench in Golden Square like a football team.
A rubbish story.
Of course.
Oh, complete hype, yeah.
But it got Saatchi talked about. And when you got people talked about, you had a stream of new business opportunities. People who were coming in, perpetually knocking on their door to see what all this fuss was about.
The Saatchi brothers talked constantly to trusted journalists, but almost journalists to quote them, a tactic they use to this day.
I spoke to Charles on pretty well a daily basis.
Did you run interviews with Maurice and Charles Saatchi? You were seeing them regularly?
They would never talk on the record.
Charlie managed to take on this rather mysterious persona.
Well, if you get an interview, the mystique is revealed. And also, it has to be him in control. He has to tell the press what he wants to see appearing.
But do you accept that some of the stories which they were floating at the time were actually quite damaging to their rivals?
Well, I think it was Maurice Saatchi who said it's not enough for one to succeed, others must fail.
Charles Saatchi was determined his new agency would not fail. He became the ringmaster, pushing and prodding others to achieve, and shouting to his creative teams, 2 ads a day keeps the sack away. In an era when dull post-war fashions were finally put to flight, Charles Saatchi decided image was everything. Just as their overtly sexy, stylish ads for Brutus jeans turned an everyday product into an expensive, must-have designer item,
I pull Brutus jeans on, I pull my Brutus jeans on.
so Charles insisted Saatchi's image must be stylish and fashionable. Their receptionists had to be sexy. Account men meeting clients had to have style.
The other stipulation at Saatchi's was that you had to be 6 foot. Absolutely. So that when prospective clients came in, they were greeted by people rising to their feet and towering over them. Once upon a time, they hired a man who was only 5'4". Charles Saatchi was livid at his brother. How come this man was hired? Maurice put in a corner. All that he could come up with was, well, Charlie, he's very clean.
To impress potential clients, Charles created the illusion that the agency was bigger and busier than it really was.
So we would get people off the street, people wandering around Golden Square, and we'd give them a £5 to sit at the desks.
Get people sort of talking and showing work and stuff like that. And so, of course, somebody walked in and thought, wow, this is fantastic.
Charles was the power behind the throne.
He was a sort of, sort of mad father, sort of mad figure that drove you and cuddled you and gave you encouragement and discouraged you and demotivated you and demoralised you and then inspired you and lifted you and so on.
Charlie would have the ideas, Maurice would make it happen.
They're very, very personable people, very attractive personalities, but they can be very rough and tough. They're good at managing top people. I don't think they're very good at managing junior people. I think they are. I think they fail the waiter test.
They were very remote from everyday people.
Their management technique is to thrust you in at the deep end and say, okay, swim like hell. And you either swim or you drown. And if you drown, there's nobody catching you.
How did Charles Saatchi treat Maurice Saatchi?
Like a brother.
Maurice was no more tolerated in failing or inadequacy than any of the rest of us were.
And if Maurice failed in the minutest way possible, Charlie would sort of scream and shout.
And he said, "Maurice, I can't believe you came from the same womb as me."
I actually did see him pick a chair up and throw it at Maurice, and you know, a chair like, you know, an office chair. Now, had it hit Maurice, I mean, it would have killed him.
These violent bouts of temper grew from his insatiable drive to expand the agency.
You can't be the biggest and the best. You've got to make a choice. And I think in the way Charlie just made the choice, that he wanted size was everything. Size was what it was about.
They really wanted to be one of the biggest agencies.
They had a very clear ambition to be the biggest agency.
To get big, they started buying other agencies. But they were still viewed as upstarts in an advertising world that remained staid and conservative.
Most of the people running agencies at that time just thought we were kind of mad, you know, thought these people are just completely crazy, and the sort of work they're purporting, the sort of work they're proposing just won't work, you know, clients won't buy it, they won't like it, it's all far too creative.
Ironically, their creativity launched them into the big league. Saatchi and Saatchi was taken over by Garland Compton, a public company. Desperate to acquire Saatchi's creative talents, they gave the brothers the largest block of shares and a lump sum. They agreed to call the company Saatchi and Saatchi Garland Compton. This was a key building block. Now the Saatchis had blue-chip clients and could raise funds on the stock market. Campaign captured their relation.
But when you actually got them around you and you looked at the work and you looked at the number of accounts they had, you realised that the hype was doing a fantastic job because there wasn't that much there. In fact, there was a kind of slightly almost rebellious view to hold at the time, which was that the Garland Compton reel of work was probably better in quality than the Saatchi and Saatchi reel.
We are asking Mrs. Stone to try Ariel for 3
To satisfy their new corporate clients, Saatchis now had to make the embarrassingly uncreative ads they had so often criticized.
Will you use from now on?
Ariel.
Ariel washes a whole lot cleaner because it's biological. You'd be surprised how much you'd miss Dunlop. Dunlop tennis balls, Dunlop inflatable boats.
But they were still looking to find ways to sell mundane products with style and humor.
Dunlop pillow beds, Dunlop Wellington boots. You'd be surprised how much you'd miss Dunlop.
Saatchi's became the agency, the fun place to work. There was a buzz of excitement, creative tension, brilliant ads, and continual celebrations. But always the goal was to be big and profitable.
Welcome to Take a Chance. Here's how it works. You at home can play. If you smoke 20 cigarettes a day, it comes...
The Saatchis had made their name by their innovative, tough anti-smoking ads.
A beautiful 25-inch color TV or a possible case of chronic bronchitis.
But it soon became clear that they weren't in business to promote good causes.
Or a chance of getting lung cancer. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. You've seen the prizes. Now it's up to you.
When they lost the Health Education Council account, Charles Saatchi switched to promoting the product he had warned could kill. His simple but eye-catching image of silk being cut is still the basis of all silk cut ads. Charles hated criticism and once hurled his presentation boards at a client who dared to question his work.
Seeing those fly down the room, as I recall on one memorable occasion, horizontally towards a client's head, really led everyone to the conclusion that he didn't like meeting them, and they certainly, it wasn't very conducive to retaining the clients to have one of the principals, physically assaulting them.
And at that moment, everybody kind of said, well, probably better be the last time you do that, Charles. And he said, suits me, and never did another one.
He became a sort of Howard Hughes-like figure, but he was perfectly accessible to those people who he liked. He wasn't neurotic.
I always remember Charlie once saying to me that he said, look, boy, as he often called me,
you know, if they meet me and find out I'm a perfectly ordinary bloke, the game's up.
And it didn't matter who you were, he would go bananas. So you had to protect the agency from this temper.
We decided we had to cure the bad temper, we had to stop the rows. And so we had to give him something that would make him happy. So we bought him a Rolls Royce, an old Rolls Royce.
At one time, Charles had 17 cars.
The driver's success first, money second. But he did then, always has enjoyed the trappings of wealth.
If you're going to be driven by success, you've got to actually get the rewards of success, otherwise there's no point.
Charlie liked music, liked paintings. Maurice liked cars, and eventually liked houses, and all of this needed money.
There's actually no point in reward in the afterlife. Sorry, I didn't mean that in a non-Christian way.
Advertising agencies were making what some might regard as obscene amounts of money, and obviously that money has to be spent on things.
We talked to people about being rich. We wanted people to earn lots of money. We wanted people to be highly paid. We wanted a reputation for paying high. There's the famous story of the Seymour.
Jeff Seymour. He was hired from another company, and he said he'd come if he had a Bentley as a company car. So he got a Bentley as a company car.
And I paid him £100,000 a year, which became known as a Seymour. And people would say, so-and-so's been hired for a Seymour, or a double Seymour, or a treble Seymour. And reputedly, we were the first people ever to pay a copywriter £100,000 a year. That doesn't sound very much now, but it was a great deal in those days.
We did feel pretty invincible. We felt that we were on a roll, and that, you know, like a gambler, you keep thinking that the next roll of the dice is going to be a good one.
But how long could the wheel of fortune keep turning?
Pay as you go, from one to one. No monthly bills, no contracts to sign. And now calls from just 2p a minute. It's up to you, from one to one.
I'm serious when it comes to wrinkles, so I use new line eraser from L'Oreal Paris. It's one serious anti-wrinkle action you can now take, short of a facelift, and a lot more simple. With retinol, the purest form of vitamin A, used nightly to reduce the appearance of first lines, fine lines, even those lines we've learned to live with. Objective measurements show a 48% reduction in the appearance of wrinkles. Me have a facelift. Forget it. New line eraser. This is skincare from L'Oreal Paris, because I'm worth it.
You can't always explain why you love something or lose it. You just do.
So be bold. Don't be afraid. And be yourself.
It's far better for some people to love something than everyone just to like it.
Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, brought to life in tomorrow's Sunday People. Our spectacular magazine tells the story of the new film with over 50 amazing pictures. At last, the story you've waited 16 years for in our free magazine, only in tomorrow's Sunday People.
And I will shape heaven.
I believe in miracles.
Linda? What's your wildest fantasy?
Angus Deaton, covered in scrummy St. Ivel shape apple strudel yogurt and no spoon. Why?
I'm just curious. Do you fancy...
Shape?
And now you can be even wilder with our thick and creamy fromage frais.
The ATS Euromaster permanent price check means our prices are always amongst the lowest around. But right now, we've reduced hundreds of thousands of tires by even more, plus up to 25% off exhausts. And we could even give your car a free brake check. So for low prices and high standards, call 0800 60 10 60 now for your nearest ATS Euromaster Centre.
If you want a personal approach to your finances, there are 4 letters worth looking out for.
H. S. B. C.
C. HSBC. The new name for Midland Bank.
In 1978, Saatchi and Saatchi scooped their biggest prize yet.
I was on holiday in Barbados at the time, and Maurice rang me up and said, do you want to handle the Conservative Party account? I said no, because I knew I would end up having to handle it, because you can't produce a junior for the future Prime Minister. You have to produce the top people.
With Bell stranded in Barbados, the Saatchis ignored his advice and prepared to turn the country blue. Their policy was attack, attack, attack. To hit first, hit hard, and keep on hitting the Labour government.
The British Labour Party managing
the techniques they pioneered in advertising, they now use to sell a political party. Simple, blunt messages, spiced with lethal humour.
Why don't the Labour managers do something about it? Well, here they come. But they're weighed down by Labour's philosophy. What are they going to do to help encourage the British lads? I believe it is the old favourite, rigid controls. This really is bringing Britain down with managers like these who need opponents.
Their first political party poster in the summer of 1978 is judged their finest, a landmark in political advertising. Lord Thornycroft, the chairman of the Conservative Party, was delighted.
We ran up colossal bills, and Thornycroft said, can we afford it? I said, of course we can afford it.
Could you afford it?
No, of course we couldn't. So anyway, we ran it, and it was wonderful. The press took it up. The Labour Party hated it. They were furious. They shouted foul. It frightened Callaghan off an October election, and he was into the winter of discontent, and the rest is history.
I don't think that other people in the world would share the view that there is mounting chaos.
Saatchis seized an opportunity offered them by the trade union.
Crisis? What crisis?
But the Conservatives had been gambling with cash they didn't have. When the bills came in, Mrs. Thatcher's treasurer had to pay a visit to the Saatchi brothers.
I said, look, you haven't got any money, we can't pay you. They looked a bit glum, and I said, look, you know, really you've got to look at it this way, if you would. If you insist on being paid now, we'll be bankrupt. We'll probably lose the election. All the clients that you want to get who are big industrialists will know full well that you have caused us to lose this election, and I don't suppose they'll be wanting to employ you. If, on the other hand, you give us a breathing space, you're going to win we're going to win the election, you're going to be great heroes, and all those very same clients will be falling over themselves to employ you. So I was taken out the room and waited, and after about an hour, I think they saw the sense of this, and very generously, I think, lent us the money to go through.
How much was this that you owed?
Oh, I don't know. It was a couple of million or something like that. I forget what the advertising campaign cost. It was a it was a substantial sum of money.
The investment reaped huge dividends.
In the early days, of course, it gave Saatchis an awareness. It gave Saatchis a notoriety. It made Saatchi an everyday word.
And it gave us access to people, and we could go and talk to people, and we could get information about things.
Charles was now distant from most advertising staff. But he was playing for higher stakes, buying more and more agencies.
Charlie's drive and push would be to say to Maurice, for God's sake, go and buy something.
We'd read in campaign that some agency had been sold to somebody else. And he said, Maurice, if you haven't bought something by Thursday, there'll be nothing left to buy. It was an extraordinary sort of concept of agencies sitting on shelves in the supermarket and the shelves being emptied, and Maurice had failed to go to the shop.
There was a squad of people actually handling acquisitions by then, a team of specialists in that sort of work. And yes, they would receive phone calls from Charles Saatchi saying, you know, I want 8 acquisitions in 8 weeks, so just go do it. But that would usually be coloured by more than a few expletives, you know.
Did he ever explain to you why he wanted to grow, buy all these companies?
Well, you become powerful, you become rich, and you become famous. That's not a bad start, is it?
Continue descent to flight level 80.
Roger, Heathrow, descending to SL80. The Saatchi brothers had also realized that advertising was increasingly a global business.
Roger, Manhattan. Continue to 2,000 feet.
A great ad could sell one brand worldwide. In 1983, the agency set a trend when their British Airways ad, inspired by Steven Spielberg's film Close Encounters, was shown in 37 countries. The Saatchis saw the future and liked it.
Manhattan, you are clear to land. 28 right.
British Airways, the world's favorite airline.
To be masters of the advertising universe, the Saatchis had to conquer the United States. If you were going to be big in advertising, you had to be big in America. This was where advertising was invented, where 50% of the world's advertising budget was spent. So the brothers went shopping. In 1982, they made their biggest purchase so far, the American Compton Communications. Then came McCaffrey and McCall. But in their rush to snap it up, they paid far more than they expected. The final payment was linked to future profits, but no limit was put on them.
They paid us $32.5 million. There was no cap on what we could make. That was unintended generosity, because without a cap, there was no ceiling.
They made a basic mistake there.
I think so. I don't think they ever made it again.
The Saatchis also picked up corporate design companies, marketing firms, and public relations agencies. In 1985, they signed contracts for 3 U.S. companies in one day.
Then all of a sudden, the press release comes out the next day, and you're one of 3 companies that were bought the same day, and you had no idea that they were buying these companies, and you were massed together in one press release. It was a little bit demeaning.
Astonishing to buy 3 companies on the same day.
Yeah, well, the attitude of these people essentially was that they were going to buy as many companies as they could.
It wasn't trying to be the best advertising agency in the world, it was just trying to be the biggest. And so it was just buying things no matter what they were. We make all sorts of promises to people, then you dump it in Tim's lap and tell him to sort it out.
The pressures, the crises, affected Bell's health. Then, the Saatchis refused him a seat on the board. Amidst great acrimony, Bell left the company.
It broke my heart at the time. I'd invested the whole of my life in that business, and I felt that it was partly mine.
With Bell out, the Saatchis were ready to take their largest gamble. The advertising agency they most coveted was Ted Bates, the world's most profitable agency, with 108 offices worldwide.
We were known for unique selling proposition. USP, that was the flag we carried.
Wonder Soft World bread contains essential vitamins, minerals, and proteins, important food elements that help build strong bodies 12 ways.
USP advertising was basically making a proposition to the consumer: buy this product, get this benefit. It's a benefit that the competition either cannot or does not offer you.
More fine to clean, deodorize, and disinfect for a complete clean. Pine Sol, the more complete cleaner.
Morris was taken to see Bob Jacoby, president of Ted Bates, and philosophized about the benefits of the 2 companies being brought together.
Jacoby takes a cigar out of his mouth and he says, "Morris, that's very nice. Now tell me about the dough."
I said, "Well, what are you thinking of paying for it? What would you pay for it?" And he said, "Oh, we'd pay $250 million. $250 million is what we figured we would get going public."
So he was offering a fair price?
Basically a very fair price. So I said, "No, I said, we have no interest in that." I said, "The agency's worth," and then unscientifically, I just doubled the number in my head. I said, the agency's worth $500 million. He said, $500 million. Boy, that's, we'd have to think about that a long time.
To buy more companies, the Saatchis needed more cash. An ever-rising share price provided the means. Once again, they simply issued more shares.
I'd been asked by Maurice Saatchi to go looking for $500 million to finance the next stage of development of Saatchis.
They raised £400 million, the second biggest rights issue ever. Extraordinarily, shareholders staked their cash without knowing how all this money would be spent.
Yes, it's very unusual that you don't specify what the deal is.
They didn't ask?
They didn't want to know.
Jacobi felt the practice of issuing more and more shares to raise money could end in disaster.
A chain letter type of thing, of where you keep getting in new money to pay off the old boys. And this thing keeps going until it reaches a point at the end of the line where someone's going to be left holding the bag.
The Saatchis didn't risk their own money on the Bates venture. While shareholders were encouraged to put money in, they were taking money out. From 1984 to 86, they raised about £14.5 million by selling shares and their share rights.
The only comment one might make is whether shareholders were right to hand over the money without asking the question, where and what is the deal?
But this was boom time Britain. Exciting, indulgent, with an ever-rising stock market. The right backdrop for Saatchi's ambitions. All they had to do, it seemed, was spend, spend, spend. Jacobi became a happy man. The Saatchis doubled their first offer and paid $507 million of shareholders' cash for Ted Bates. Jacobi's share was a cool $107 million.
I ascribe it to this overwhelming desire, ego desire to be number one, be the largest group in the world.
"112 Bates employees became millionaires, many multi-millionaires.
This was like winning the lottery. Wouldn't you celebrate if you got $1 million in the lottery? I'll bet you'd have a party. Well, we had a party. This was truly a huge event.
With the benefit of hindsight, we probably paid too much.
$500 million in cash. Never done before.
I'm so delighted I asked for cash because that stock went down the chute in a couple of years after that.
There's no question these have been the best years of my life, and for that I think Maurice deserves a thank you, and Charles and the shareholders.
Jacobi insisted on a special clause in the contract warning that several of Bates's best clients might remove their accounts in the event of a takeover.
And by God, we lost them. And at least he lived up to that part of the contract, and the deal went ahead anyway.
Would you have signed a contract like that?
I wouldn't do that, huh?
Stop bad breath that starts in the mouth.
For nearly 2 decades, Bates had created the advertisements for Colgate, but they were in a marketing war with Procter & Gamble, another Saatchi client, who also had toothpaste brands.
Colgate, 3 ways clean is Colgate clean.
It was very sad. I had run the Colgate account for a while, so it was particularly sad for me that we had to give that up. But that was the price of the deal.
How much was that worth in billings?
Colgate at the time was probably worldwide worth over $100 million in billings.
Only Zertz has that lively fresh...
Bates lost nearly $400 million worth of accounts under Saatchi's wing.
Thank you, Zertz.
The Saatchis were so busy buying companies, they had little time to personally manage them. By the end of 1986, Saatchi and Saatchi had spent over £650 million of shareholders' funds on their American acquisition spree. The Saatchis now searched for a master strategist to solve the problems they'd created in America. They chose Anthony Simmons Gooding, chief executive of Whitbread, the brewery company. He had never worked for an advertising company.
Wherever I was in New York, no more than 5 minutes away from a Saatchi and urinal. It was amazing.
He stuck this poor guy, Simmons Gooding, into the U.S. and made a basket case out of the fellow.
All these agencies, big and small, and some have been bought by mistake and all the rest of it.
And he was overwhelmed. He was confused. He had no idea what this thing is called advertising.
He didn't know what it was to nurture a client and nurture creative people and pick the right people for the right spot.
Anyway, there was Bates, and Bates was big, but there was then Saatchi Compton, and there was DFS, and there was Backer and Spielberg, and then a whole load of other ones. And what to do with it?
Under pressure to cut costs, Simmons Gooding merged 19 companies into 7 and tried to create 2 agencies in America, Saatchi's and Bates. Former owners were furious.
They loved the idea of selling their agency and filling their trousers with all sorts of huge lumps of dollars, but they couldn't stand what happened afterwards. And it was amazing how they forgot how good their bank balance is looking. And now, of course, they've been asked to do some pretty unpleasant things, like fire people, merge officers. It was a very, very mouvementé sort of period. Not good fun for them, not good fun for me.
His nervous system was shattering at this time, I felt. And he said, I have to fire 1,500 people.
They were so tricky. I mean, Larry Light, who must have got God knows how many millions, I remember working with him. And this is afterwards, and we were sort of vaguely settled down, and he was causing me a lot of trouble. And I said, but Larry, why do you do this? Why do you cause me all this trouble? You know, you got X million. Oh, yes, but that was yesterday. You have to buy me every day.
Anthony is right. Anthony is right, and I'm one of those people. And therefore, you could say I'm part of the problem. But they gave me and those others a financial incentive to leave. So I come back to the real problem began. The seed of disaster was planted at the time of purchase.
Simmons Gooding found bitter rivalry for the top jobs at Bates and decided to take action.
The driver for my car met me at the airport and said, Bob, that he had just been fired. I said, what are you talking about? I said, nobody can fire you. He says, well, you've been fired too. I said, you've got to be kidding me. Well, I said, I'm too tired to even think about that. So I went home that Friday night.
I said, my secretary said, somebody from New York wants to talk, you won't give their name. Shall I put them through? So out of curiosity, I said, yes, that's who this is. And this voice said, I understand you're coming over to see Mr. Jacoby and that you're going to fire him on Monday. And I said, well, that may be or maybe not so, but why are you telling me this? He said, well, I just want to tell you that he's a very dangerous man. He carries a gun and he drinks.
None of them ever contacted me, and to this day, have not contacted me. So I read about my demise after all those years in the New York Times on a Saturday morning.
Jacoby has seen his sizable fortune quadruple on the stock exchange. Less comforting was watching the steady decline of Bates in the hands of Saatchi and Saatchi.
And as we look back, we had 2 amateurs running it, and they screwed it up. Well, what they screwed up is our reputation and us too. I mean, we got the money, fine. If we didn't have that besides, boy, we'd shoot ourselves, I guess.
Lay out the towel, put on your sunglasses, sit back and relax.
I start off at factor 20.
You can never be too careful, especially on your face.
I'm the chairman. Get out of it. What am I doing? Oh, I'm giving you all unfettered access to a free business website. Website, man, yeah! So you'll all know your PE ratio from your market capitalization. What about dress down Fridays? Yes, but no flares.
FT.com completely mad about business. You logged on.
New from Brita, the only water filter jugs that tell you when it's time to change your Brita cartridge, electronically. Brita does wonders for water.
Unlimited, the machine was working extremely well, and it was simply a question of finding the right firms and going out to pick them up.
The money would again come from the shareholders' pockets.
The notion of having virtually an unlimited pool of money available eliminated that whole issue from my area of concern, so it was very, very attractive.
It looked like it could continue forever.
Indeed it did. Yes, indeed it did. A lot of investors thought so. So did I.
Under orders to create one of the world's biggest consulting firms in record time, Miller made a bold play. He bid for his old company.
But what would it have cost, did you expect, to buy Arthur Andersen?
We thought it would be multiples of $1 billion. Multiples of $1 billion.
How many multiples?
Well, we weren't quite sure.
Their move failed, but it still sent shivers through senior advertising executives as they realized Miller had virtually a blank check to buy up consultancy companies. Then they learned that top consultancy companies, unlike advertising agencies, invested hundreds of millions of pounds every year just to train staff.
What did you think when you heard that?
Oh my God.
Incredulity would soon turn to utter incomprehension. Maurice and Charles now tried to storm the financial establishment by making a move to purchase one of Britain's major institutions, the Midland Bank. The news of the brothers' approach stunned the city and key executives at Saatchi and Saatchi.
As far as I know, none of the board members were aware that that was taking place, except the brothers, of course.
And he and Maurice were in the office, and they're sort of slightly sheepish grins, I remember. And we looked at them and we said nothing for a moment. And Charlie said, "Isn't it great?" So he said, we think you may be mad. And he said, no, you don't understand it. I mean, this is a real opportunity. We said, anyway, if it does go through, who are you going to get to run it? And he looked at Rod and I and said, well, you two. You've run everything we've thrown at you so far and haven't dropped it, so we thought you could have a go at it. And I still to this day don't know whether he's joking.
And he said, well, it's one of the great things, of course, is that if you own a bank, you never run out of money. It was quite bizarre.
That very seriously undermined the credibility of the company in the eyes of the city, because in the eyes of the city it was an undoable deal, and the logic wasn't there, and our management skills were not there to run it.
They began to see that these people were perhaps megalomaniacs rather than merely successful people who had brought the advertising business to the city and made it both profitable and fashionable.
A Financial Times columnist wrote, "The bid was an idle daydream by a firm that has got carried away with its own self-importance. The idea is laughable." The Saatchi stock dropped over 10%. In the only major television interview Maurice Saatchi has ever given, he admitted the approach was a folly.
My favourite subject. Well, the Midland Bank was, given that your mindset is that you wish to diversify, I've discussed that already, the Midland was a very undervalued asset, in our opinion.
Wasn't it also the moment, in fact, though, when other people took one look at you and thought there was a danger you were getting carried away with your own hubris?
Yes, it was. Very well put.
1 month later, the stock market crash cut 1/3 off the value of their shares in 24 hours. In 1987, Victor Miller, the chief executive of the consulting division, was asked to head advertising as well.
I didn't know anything about advertising. I had been with a consulting firm my entire life. I had been a client of advertising firms, but that hardly makes one knowledgeable about the profession.
And now you're in charge of perhaps the biggest in the world.
Yes, indeed.
1987 was a year full of drama for the Saatchis. They almost lost the support of Mrs. Thatcher. Embarking on her third election campaign, she felt Saatchis had lost their way. and feared the agency which had helped put her in power might now get her booted out.
Have a shorter campaign. I don't believe in starting until I've been adopted as a candidate.
And it all goes back to a terrible moment when they presented a strategy to her in the early part of '87, in the January, I think, which is known as the TBW presentation, which stands for That Bloody Woman, in which they basically argued that the greatest weakness of the Conservative Party was her, and that she was really what was standing between them and success. This is not a very sensible or bright thing to say to the great person.
Since leaving the agency, Tim Bell and the brothers had scarcely spoken. But Thatcher insisted Bell was brought in as a consultant. Both felt Saatchi's ads lacked bite and sparkle.
And I sensed a continuing frustration in her that they weren't doing what she wanted them to do.
The crisis came to a head on Wobbly Thursday, a week before the election. A rogue poll suggested Labour could win. There was hysteria in Downing Street and at Tory head office. Thatcher wanted a new positive advertising campaign. She turned to Bell, not to Saatchi and Saatchi.
We just wrote some ads which said, you know, nurses up, midwives up, tax down, jobs up, you know, whatever. And wrote at the bottom, Britain's a success, don't let Labour ruin it. And she loved it. That campaign was given to the Saatchis, as I understand it, and they rewrote it and called it Britain is Great Again, Don't Let Labour Wreck It. And I suppose at the core of that is the difference between us. I believe very strongly in persuasion and using moderate language and getting people to buy into things by persuading them, not by frightening them and bullying them.
I've always been very competitive.
But this was the 80s, the high watermark of Thatcher's Britain.
Yeah, the right car is important to me.
If you were forceful, tough, ambitious, you could get what you wanted. That was the Saatchi culture.
The places you go, the clothes you wear, the people.
What the top ad men didn't want was an Audi.
I got into Maseratis and Ferraris because I liked them.
I mean, I had a bit of a Porsche habit in those days, which was thoroughly enjoyable.
Especially converted Jaguar.
You know, it was an advertising agency in the 80s, so they were flash and vulgar, basically.
The company provided Maurice with 2 Bentley Continentals. That was just the tip of their expenses iceberg. In 1988, the brothers' expenses, their salary and the salaries of their assistants, cost the company a reported £6 million. Their senior staff shared in the good times. The incentives were huge, often paid in unconventional ways.
A brown paper envelope full of money was a fantastic reward.
By June 1988, the unlimited pool of shareholders' money had dried up. So the brothers took a risk and borrowed heavily to the tune of £177 million. They had to pay annual interest and repay over £210 million within 5 years. The Saatchis gambled that those holding the loan stock, called convertible preference shares, would eventually accept shares, not cash, a gamble that nearly bankrupted the company. But with their borrowings, the Saatchis bought another consultancy. The illusion remained that all was well in the Saatchi empire. For the year ended September 1988, Saatchi's reported record profits of £138 million. But that company report was like a Saatchi ad. It gave the best possible image. Over the years, the company had used accountancy devices, all of them legal, to boost profits. Unknown to many shareholders, ominous clouds were gathering. By the late autumn of 1988, financial director David Newlands would tell anyone who listened that the company was running out of money.
It had over-expanded hugely in the 80s, financed in large part by debt, put in very little controls or indeed no strategy as to how to manage these new businesses or plans as to how to integrate them.
Is there anybody out there?
In March 1989, the empire began falling apart. Maurice Saatchi warned of a fall in profits, and the share price dropped over 20%. The company entered a nightmarish period. reflected in one of their ads. For the next 4 years, the very survival of the company would be in doubt. The illusion.
He is really a commodities broker who was let loose on the art world. So you have a guy coming in, you know, with a load of money, prepared to buy 5 things at a time. He can really push his weight around. He can beat people down on the prices.
But the art gamble was profitable. The company eventually made £15 million when 400 paintings were sold. And with £1 billion of debts, the company needed all the money it could lay its hands on. Banks had to be persuaded to keep the company afloat in exchange for yet more shares.
Outstandingly tough. Easily the hardest 15 months of my working life.
Onto the scene now strode David Harrow. As manager of a mutual fund in Chicago, he saw an opportunity. A new management team was rescuing the company, but the shares had slumped by over 90% from their 80s peak. He began buying £30 million worth of shares.
The emphasis in the 80s was to grow, grow, grow. Get big, bigger, and biggest at any expense. That means at the expense of clients, at the expense of employees, and at the expense of shareholders.
Harrow was assured Maurice and Charles had been shunted aside.
That's what we are wary of, that they were out of the driver's seat of being able to spend the company's resources.
While Dreyfus and Scott were busy trying to save the company, the chairman, Maurice Saatchi, was expected to look after clients.
One of his roles was to bring in new business.
Yes.
And you were disappointed with the amount of new business coming in?
Yes.
Were you also disappointed with losing business in '93?
Yes.
2 large U.S. clients, Chrysler and cosmetics company Helen Curtis, withdrew their account. Criticism mounted that the brothers were neglecting clients.
In no way would it be possible to say they scoured the globe getting to meet all the employees and clients, you know, of this global business.
Surprising.
Surprising what?
They didn't do that. They didn't go around the globe.
Well, I mean, I'm sure they had their reasons.
Did you know what they were?
No, but, you know, I have nothing to say about that.
On December the 3rd, 1993, Charles Saatchi was forced off the board of directors that he rarely attended anyway, and made honorary president. 3 days later, Saatchi and Saatchi warned profits would fall. The shares dropped 20%. An extraordinary series of events followed. The very next day, unknown to the company, nearly 900,000 Saatchi and Saatchi shares were sold, raising about £1.2 million. These came from a nominee holding acting for the joint interest of the Saatchi brothers. Maurice says the joint interest had been ended and the shares belonged to Charles, and neither the company nor the stock exchange had to be told because Charles was no longer a director. But a company investigation later discovered that nearly 700,000 shares sold by the nominee account had been held apparently for Maurice. On December the 12th, the press reported the brothers might buy out a chunk of the company. Then began a press campaign criticizing Scott, who took over as chief executive early that year. In Chicago, David Harrow read these reports and feared for his investments.
You don't make a bid for the company or try to or look at alternatives to buying the company when you're acting in the role as the guardian of the shareholders. I mean, there's a complete conflict of interest there.
Maurice was talking privately to journalists. In January 1994, he launched 4 top city business journalists from national newspapers and paid the bills on his company expenses. Directors and shareholders now started to ask, what was the reason for these private press briefings? Was Maurice Saatchi undermining his own chief executive, trying to regain control of Saatchi and Saatchi, or trying to buy back part of the Saatchi empire chiefly? Hero now decided to confront Maurice in person for the first time. His worst fears about the brothers came true when he visited the Saatchi headquarters in Berkeley Square. Europe's most expensive office space was empty of Saatchi employees, except for the brothers and their assistants on the 6th floor. Disastrous property deals like this were costing £10 million a year.
I said to him, if you're really concerned about this business, why don't you put the hatchet down, put every ounce of wealth you have into the company, demonstrate that you would make a significant personal investment in the business.
And what did he say?
His response to that was, well, I couldn't do that. That would be far too risky for me.
The battle now raged. Maurice pushed for the demotion of Charlie Scott from chief executive to chief financial officer at a meeting with some directors in March 1994. Scott threatened to resign, and the board immediately backed down.
It was not acceptable to me, and I didn't think it was the right thing for the company.
Do you think the banks would have accepted it?
I doubt it, no.
Because, I mean, you must have had a very close relationship with the banks at that time.
I certainly did, yeah.
And they relied on you seeing through the restructuring of the company.
I think they wanted to make sure that I was in control of the checkbook, yeah.
With Hero threatening to vote Maurice out at the next annual general meeting, the struggle for control of the company moved to Chicago. Company directors told Hero that Maurice had agreed to make peace, cut his salary entitlement from £625,000 to £200,000, and end his 5-year rolling contract.
We were very happy that, for once, his pay was getting closer to reflective of his value to the business, that maybe, expenses would become aligned with what is reasonable in the industry. And more importantly, was his pledge, to become a team player and not to be working for Maurice Saatchi PLC as opposed to Saatchi and Saatchi PLC, which is a company owned by the shareholders.
So when you went to Chicago, what was your intention?
To structure a deal whereby we had an energetic and enthusiastic chairman who would bring home millions of dollars of new business.
To energize the chairman, an incentive scheme was suggested, which Hero supported. But then he heard Maurice would receive £5 million if the share price doubled.
Handing anyone such a pot of gold, I think, would have been extremely demoralizing to the company.
By October, the adversaries were on a collision course. Hero believed Maurice was trying to seize control of the boardroom by having friends and acquaintances chosen as non-executive directors.
He still felt, I think, that it was very much Saatchi and Saatchi. It was he and his brother had set it up. It was their name. It was their company.
On December the 8th, the pro and anti-Maurice factions clashed at Bates headquarters in New York's Chrysler Building. Major fund managers holding 45% of the shares came face to face with the board of directors.
David Hero did sort of open the batting, if you like, for the shareholders.
The shareholders, each and every one, was unified in wanting a new chairman of the company.
Said enough's enough, and it's our view that Maurice should no longer be chairman of the PLC, and if you're not prepared to ask him or persuade him to step down, then we will call an EGM and put it to the vote.
And as the board members took their time, each and every one of them stated that, well, though the chairman is not adequate, now might not be the time.
The non-executive directors at the time were all people who had known Maurice for a long time, may even have been chosen by him or suggested by him as appointments to the board, and liked him.
They were extremely non-committal and, one would say, wishy-washy.
And it was a very hard decision for them to make.
Until it got to a director by the name of Ted Levitt, who basically took the floor and in a very stunning oration gave reasons why he thought the chairman should be replaced. He stated that the chairman knew nothing or very little of marketing today and of advertising today. You could hear a pin drop. And I think the other directors realized that it was time to act.
A special meeting was called for a week later in London. The directors met to finally decide on Maurice's fate. On the table were letters from 4 major clients.
Mars, BA, I think the Mirror Group, and I think Dixon's all said roughly the same thing. Yeah, Maurice is our key man, and if you do fire him, well, we're not sure whether we want to stay with you.
There was always a concern that accounts would be lost. And I think the management was prepared to deal with that. However, there was a greater concern that if the chairman would stay on, that you'd lose a company. What we did not want is them to have their hands on the purse strings again.
Saatchi's own financial advisors said an overwhelming majority of shareholders' votes were stacked against Maurice. Finally, after 8 hours, the board voted Maurice out as a director and chairman, but offered him the position of head of the Saatchi and Saatchi advertising network with a vastly increased salary. Maurice demanded time to make up his mind.
On January the 3rd, Maurice came back, yes, he sent the fax, which was on my desk, saying, no thanks, I'm going to go.
Three months later, curious goings-on at a fashionable address in central London. The transformation of an unfinished, unlet office from empty space into a busy, bustling conference room. There were flowers and television monitors and attractive receptionists. The illusionists Maurice and Charles were back in business and starting all over again, using the same tricks of the trade they'd used 25 years earlier. This was the new Saatchi agency, later renamed M&C Saatchi, and it was pitching to win the prestigious British Airways account. Each senior BA executive was handed a new laptop computer, loaded with the new Saatchi agency's witty business pitch. The highlight showed former Saatchi and Saatchi executives who had defected to the new agency waiting at home on garden leave. They were tied by contract from working for 1 year. The most senior former Saatchi executives, dubbed the Three Amigos, were equal partners in the new agency with Maurice and Charles. The new agency won the account. And when the BA executives left, so did the new Saatchi agency, back to its own small, cramped offices. British Airways was one of 4 major clients that defected from Saatchi and Saatchi to the new Saatchi agency. The accounts were worth £200 million.
Good morning, Saatchi Saatchi.
At the time, the defections shook the foundations of Saatchi and Saatchi's London office. But the loss represented just 6% of Saatchi and Saatchi's £4 billion worldwide turnover, and they regained this within a year. For M&C Saatchi, it was a remarkable start.
Maurice's skill has been demonstrated to all these people in the last 3 years with the invention of M&C Saatchi. It's one of the most successful agencies in Britain.
But memories of the golden years, when Saatchi and Saatchi dominated the advertising world, when the company took extraordinary risks and posted astonishing successes, still linger.
I think they put England on the map as a global player. They proved that you could start from virtually nothing, a small consultancy, and become the biggest agency in the world.
The brothers have reached heights even they may not have imagined 25 years ago. No longer outsiders, they're fully at home inside the establishment.
And I must thank the noble Lord Chalfont, for giving me this opportunity to make my maiden speech in this important debate on the media which he has initiated today.
Maurice Saatchi was ennobled by John Major as a reward for his services to the Conservative Party.
My lords, it could be said that...
And like his brother Charles, he has wealth, fame and social status.
...tree of knowledge, humans felt a need to know.
Although the Saatchi brothers declined to be interviewed for this program, they believed that if they'd been allowed to regain control of Saatchi and Saatchi, their flair and promotional skills could have brought back the good times. Many who witnessed their unusual brand of management would find it hard to agree.
And you think that the share price was once £10, I think it went down to about 18 or 20p, so somebody must have lost billions, or a billion. I think it's, well, all credit to them, but they can still walk tall in Britain, not so good in America.
I think it's one of the great disasters of global business, but mostly because it was a missed opportunity. There is no doubt that if this had been well managed instead of poorly managed, the Saatchi and Saatchi brand could be one of the great phenomenons of world business.
Reducing a complicated story to a simple, powerful message, that was the skill which gave birth to the Saatchi legend. It's a skill their new agency has applied to the tortuous conflict which tore apart Saatchi and Saatchi.
Come in. Ah, Maurice, sit down.
It made an ad which sums up with brutal humor the Saatchi version of Maurice's downfall.
Taken huge hits on bonds and our portfolios are underwater. Things are looking bad. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Nobody likes you and you're fired.